do you think they should just do away with the superdelegates? Because if you look at pledged delegates, it's a lot closer race. If you throw in the superdelegates, Hillary Clinton is just a couple of hundred away from closing this thing.
Yeah, it doesn't seem fair that that superdelegates can play such an outsized role. I mean, you know, we learned in a democracy it's one person, one vote. Evidently not in the primary system. So we don't like the concept of the superdelegates. It's pretty much an insurance policy for the establishment that they can make sure that the primary doesn't go awry.
All right, the two ice cream guys who agree with Jane Sanders, wife of Bernie Sanders, Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield, co-founders, of course, of Ben and Jerry's, big Bernie Sanders supporters. Gentlemen, good to have both of you. What do you think, Ben, of what she is saying? If not for these superdelegates, and the math shows it, it'd be a lot closer race.
That's absolutely correct. And superdelegates are undemocratic. The idea is to find a candidate that the people want, and superdelegates go against the will of the people.
You know, Jerry, the flip side of that, though, is that Hillary Clinton still leads by a few hundred delegates with pledged delegates. So this is a canard that the Sanders folks are raising. You say what?
You know, I think in terms of pledged delegates, it's about 55-45, and the upcoming primaries are much more favorable to Bernie. And so by the time the convention comes, the difference in the pledged delegates is going to actually be closer. And by the time they go to the convention, neither candidate is going to have enough pledged candidates to win the nomination.
Well, we don't know. You're right. We'll see. But let me get your thoughts on how loyal you would be to Hillary Clinton if she ends up being the nominee. I mentioned to Jane Sanders that a third of Sanders supporters were asked about this and said, well, you know what, we'd have a tough time voting for Hillary. Do you guys share that view?
We're of two minds.
I don't know what that means.
It would be a pretty difficult step for me to make, and I'm not positive what I would do, but I'm certainly not there at this time.
Jerry, what do you think of the idea of at least, if Hillary Clinton is the nominee, on her short list of potential running mates, Bernie Sanders?
Boy, you know, I'm not that politically astute, but that doesn't strike me as something that's very likely at this point.
I know that, but one of the things I was trying to get at Jane Sanders, who was very diplomatic on this subject, well, we might look at her as a running mate, but the idea being that when a short list is put out, as it was put out by some of the Hillary Clinton folks, and his name wasn't on it, you do have to wonder whether that appears rude to someone who has gotten a lot of passionate support, more than 10 million votes, routinely brings in $40 to $50 million a month, usually 20, 30 bucks at a time. What do you think?
Well, I mean, let's be clear about one thing. The decision has not been made yet about who's going to be the candidate. We're going to go right till the convention.
I understand that. I guess I'm taking the leap. If it turned out that your guy doesn't get there, should he be considered as a running mate?
Boy, you know, that's kind of above my pay grade.
By the way, there are very few people above your pay grade, but I'll entertain the thought.
You know, I don't. I think what's important for Bernie is having every person have a chance to have their vote counted and going into the convention with a platform that really expresses what he's been talking about, whether it's a $15 minimum wage or health care for all or getting big money out of politics. I think that's the big issue.
Yeah.
You know, I think the interesting thing is that the primaries are not indicative of how a general election would go for Bernie, because all the independents are excluded from most of the primaries.
Well, certainly the big ones, minus the state he won, where it was open to. You're right about that. But, Ben, could I ask you, while you're on that thought, do you think, given the campaign the way it is now, that it was a mistake on Sanders' part not to at least address the email issue with Hillary Clinton, or for that matter, the Clinton Foundation? If for no other reason than to raise doubts and raise legitimate issues that those on the right and left have raised, but that he has not. By not going there, he hurt himself in this race.
I don't think it was a mistake. Bernie's been clear from the outset that he wants this election to be about the substantive issues facing our country. And,
but doesn't that cut to the core of who he says Hillary Clinton is? Whether you buy that or not, that whether it's a trust issue or is she hooked up with the rich and powerful, is that enough?
He has not been wanting to run a campaign based on individual personalities. He's been wanting to run a campaign based on principles and what policies our country should advance. And so, no, it was not a mistake for him not to talk about those things.
And it's completely consistent with who he is as a person.
You're right. It is consistent with who he is. I just wonder politically that kicked him in the hiney, you know?
I think the fact that Bernie is authentic and genuine and honest is much more important than any single strategic issue here or there.
Well, I mean, the reality is that a guy who came out of nowhere in terms of the national picture is now tied for Hillary on national polls.
It's a valid point. It's a very valid point.
And that's despite the fact that the entire Democratic establishment has been arrayed against him, and up until recently, there was a media blackout on him. You know, there's no doubt in my mind that if the media had devoted as much time to Bernie as they did to Trump, he would be way far ahead. He'd be leading right now.
Well, you should have sent them cartons of ice cream. I could have solved it right there. Guys, I want to thank you both very, very much.
So far.
Do not change Chunky Monkey. That's all I'm saying. Leave that alone. Guys, very good having you.
That's my election year promise to you.
Excellent. Wonderful. Guys, thank you.